Travel with us now through the dimensions of time, beyond even the furthest stars, as we search out new and wondrous worlds far from Eternia. On this journey, we will review comics, movies, shows, and more that hold a special place in our own fandom. What new world will be discovered this week? Find out right now as Legends of Grayskull goes OffWorld!
So, hey, did you get that email?
Oh my God.
Reinforcements, and my head went in my hands when I saw that one because I wasn't expecting them so soon.
That's so soon. That's the thing. I just talked to you about, like, I couldn't get into the, Paxis wave like I wanted to, and then it's like, there's now, what is it? Let me bring it up here. The call for help rings out. Honestly, though, I was kind of dumb when I saw that subject line. I'm like, the call for help rings out. I'm like, are they looking for volunteers or like, before I opened it, I'm like, because they just announced Legion's Con and everything, so I'm like, maybe they're like trying to set up like like PowerCon does that, or they did in years past. I don't think will this year, where like through the org forums they'd be like, hey, we need people checking tickets and helping at the merch booth and stuff like that. Like that's what I thought it was gonna be. Like, Legion's Con is here. Can you guys, Then I open it up and it's like that beautiful Nate Barch artwork there. And the wait is almost over. They are coming. I'm like, it's the builders.
Yeah. And I'm
it's the builders.
As much as I was happy to see that, I was also like, I was thinking this was going to hit in March or April, not right at the beginning of the year when I didn't have the funds at the moment. And I'm pretty sure by the time I get my funds, that's also when they're going to be out of reinforcements, and I'll wait for the next wave of reinforcements.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure you picked up on it right away, too. As soon as I saw that journal entry and the numbers, I'm like, that's a date. It did take me a minute on the time, because I'm like, what's at the end, though? And I'm like, 11 a.m. Eastern. I was like,
11 Eastern, next Saturday.
Is that Saturday? Yeah, that is Saturdays. Week
22nd.
Week
from today, 11 in the morning. Eastern time, So
now they did say, I mean, obviously the original thought was these are going to be like evergreen figures. I know they backed off of that just because we all know how ridiculous Mythic Legions sell.
Yeah.
But I gotta imagine if the quantity they ordered at one time they thought was going to be evergreen, like these should at least last a hot minute. Like you know what I mean?
That's the thing. Like in the Cabal, I've been seeing people going, you might be lucky if they last like 2-3 hours tops, and I'm like,
think? See, I was thinking I was thinking they'd have a chance to last a couple days. Now again, I'm not. I
would hope.
I'm late to the line, and I know it's a little confusing to me still, because there's like Legion builders, and then there's like deluxe Legion builders, right? Like there's different types of them. And as far as I know, we still don't know what we're getting here, right? They've never officially.
No, we're getting the first deluxe barbarian, which he's actually up on the thing behind me. That the one that it's the bear buck barbarian.
Okay.
And so he's going to be a big draw. I think he's $55 for one of him. And then they're doing the Black Knight. They're doing skeleton. They're doing what is it? Orc. And I want to say a goblin.
Okay.
And then I think there was one other one, and I think it. I don't want to think it's a dwarf, but it's basically for anybody who hasn't ever gotten any of these, because on the secondary market, I mean, hell, the Barbarian pack, because of the versatility in that one, that thing is going up until they made the announcement about the Evergreen stuff. That thing was going for over $200 by itself, as long as it was, all of the accessories were in it. So yeah, it's like thankfully it's 55 for that one, and then the others are 25 a pop, I want to say.
Okay, so only one is the higher price. See, I thought they were all going to be that higher price. So it's like, well, if they're the higher priced ones, maybe that's less likely that people are going to clean them out.
We'll see. Because
that's not.
I
that's
wouldn't.
Not bad.
No, and that's the thing with those numbers. I'm really curious how many customizers are going to go in there and just kill it off, because
that's what you're worried about.
Bear bucks and all that stuff. It's like those are like gold right now for a lot of customizers. And I mean that, like when Vitus hit, that was a huge deal because you got bare arms and bare legs for the first time. All four, arms and legs, they're bare, and you can have flesh colored or human colored stuff instead of the orc, the greens or whatever, or the reds. So we'll see what happens. But when I saw that, I'm like, March or April was what I thought. It literally said on their site, it said spring of 2022. And I'm like, I got time. I could probably get maybe 2 or 3 of the deluxe barbarians, maybe get like 3 or 4 of the skeletons, because those are the ones I really want out of the pack, out of the grouping so far. So
maybe this is something they do where they can't quite keep them evergreen, but maybe like once a quarter, like maybe they'll just have like these standing orders that are just constantly kind of coming. That'd be nice too. So they sell out, but come quarter 2, spring, here's another wave, and and not even necessarily like maybe like bring in like one new one each time, but not like change it up a lot. Just keep your basics, but just keep them replenishing until people kind of go, yeah, we've had enough. Which, like you said, with customizers, I don't think that's ever really gonna happen.
And to be honest, I know Travis on My Wife Is Going to Kill Me has said this, and I agree with him completely. Now, if I don't know anybody who doesn't have Mythic Legions one way or the other now. And if I met somebody and they were like, well, why do you like this line? The first figure I'd give them would be the Barbarian builder. Because that one, it's like, look at all of the versatility of this. You can do whatever you want. There's 2 different heads. You can pop in different parts for the helmets. You can give them horns. You can give them the wings. You can get whatever you want. And you have like 2, 3, or 4 different ways of displaying just one figure to your heart's content. Yeah. And it's like, if you like that, then there's these other figures, and those are named figures, and those are like, there's story around them. But this figure, you can make your own story and turn them into whatever you want. And that was the one, once Rhaegar got me into it really bad, and then I got Adam on, then that was the one where I'm like, wow, this is the best, like out of all of them. Because I mean, now I'm like, ooh, I can line my shelf with like 5 of these, all different, and have it. Each of these is telling its own different story and everything. So yeah, it's definitely a goal, but I'm not seeing, like, if I get one at this point because of where this is falling, I'm like, sweet. If I can't even pull that off, it's like, I'll have to wait it out then. See what happens if there's another one. So we'll see.
We'll see. Welcome everybody to Legends of Grayskull OffWorld. We started with a little mythic talk there, but that is not our topic of discussion today.
No.
But before we get to that, I'm Matthew Dooch, here again with Shawn Scavarna. Unfortunately, Jesse Arnold could not make it tonight. He is missed sorely. Now I gotta just put up with Shawn all night, which is not as fun.
That's what my wife says too. So
the struggle is
that
real.
Poor woman. The struggle is real. First world problems. # struggle is real.
Well, we're gonna buddy cop it through an OffWorld here. So tonight we are going to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, this is a 2021 American superhero film based on the Marvel Comics character Spider-Man, co-produced by Columbia Pictures and Marvel Studios, and distributed by Sony Pictures Releasing. This is the sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming, 2017, and Spider-Man Far From Home, 2019, and the 27th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I think that number might be in dispute now. To that later. Hold on to that.
Mhm.
The film was directed by John Watts and written by Chris McKenna and Eric Summers. It stars Tom Holland as Peter Parker Spider-Man, alongside Zendaya, Benedict Cumberbatch, Jacob Batalon, Jon Favreau, Jamie Foxx, Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina, Benedict Wong, Tony Revolori, Marissa Tomei, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire. In the film, Parker asks Dr. Stephen Strange to use magic to make his Spider-Man identity a secret again, following its public revelation at the end of Far From Home. When the spell goes wrong, the multiverse is broken open, which allows visitors from alternate realities to enter Parker's universe. This was released on December 13th, 2021. Runtime is 148 minutes. The budget was $200 million. And as of today, January 15th, 2022, it has brought in $1.5 billion. Billion. With a B.
With a B. Yeah.
Dollars.
Mm.
Oh. And obviously, guys, probably should have said it before the cast list, but you know what? This is OffWorld. We do what we want. Spoilers. Yep. If you haven't seen it already, you've for sure been spoiled. I know I was the last of our group to see it, and I think literally I could not have gone a day longer, because the day after I managed to make it through. No spoilers, no nothing. Everybody that saw it, Shawn included, was really cool. Didn't give anything away.
Nope.
Even now, granted, I did step back a little bit from Facebook and everything, but I wasn't like off it completely, and I still didn't get spoiled. Whereas like the day after, I just a quick scroll was like, oh, there's that. Oh, wow, you know. So I don't know. I hit it perfectly there. Because there's that point where everyone's just like, you know what? It's been long enough. And, I mean, at this point, we're talking a month, basically. So, yeah, if you haven't seen it by now, I'm sure it's been spoiled for you already. And I'm sorry. Because it's part of that this is the first movie in a long time, even before COVID and everything else, where I'm like, I got to get to the theater. I cannot wait. And, honestly, I can't remember the last movie that I was like that about.
Well, I'm going to start off by saying to my cousin Alan, turn this off. Because I know he and I tried to go see it together about a week or two back. And he hadn't seen it yet. I saw, like I said, I saw about 4/5 of it with my kids. And I missed the very beginning for the most part because of going out to the concession stand to get them stuff and everything. But for the most part, I've seen a majority of the film. And he had still not seen it. And the other day he said to me, I'm going to wait until it's on digital, because at this point he's just like, I'm done worrying about COVID. I just want to enjoy it. And I'm going to enjoy it where, you know, I feel safest at home digitally. And I'm like, okay, turn this off, because I don't want it ruined. And we talked about it that night. And even I was tiptoeing around plot points. So he wasn't getting too much more than the previews would give you.
You heard him, Alan. Out.
Yeah,
go.
Turn this off
now.
So
hey, we said, Alan. We said go.
Go to bed. Go to bed.
Go, Alan. We'll see you in a month or so.
But
all right, he's gone.
Yeah,
we're good to go.
Like, I got to admit, going into this one, like, Spider-Man movies for me, they were a big deal when they first started. 2002.
Everything. X-Men was cool, but when Sam Raimi's Spider-Man came out, that was like,
Yeah,
here we go.
exactly. And I'd say, the first two movies were definitely like, events. You had to go opening night. I was there like as soon as I got off work. I had a ticket for probably like the 5 o'clock show.
Yeah.
I think I even left work early to get there. And I took my mom that day because my mom was excited to even see it. She grew up reading the old comics back in the 60s and stuff. So we went and saw it, and I was just sitting there going, I can't believe we're watching a Spider-Man movie, because I thought this would be the one character that would be hardest to adapt. I mean, watch the 70s show, and you proved to me that worked, But here we are, Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, they pulled it off. And the first two were big deals, and then once 3 hit, Spider-Man movies.
3 was a big deal, though. I mean, once we saw it wasn't as big of a deal. But leading up to it, especially as a 90s kid, I mean, Venom and the black suit and all that. Yeah. Like, I think everyone was stoked for it. It just, it suffered for, a whole episode on that. But, I mean, that original trilogy from beginning to end was an event. And then, but yeah, it was very clear that was going to be it.
Yeah. And it's funny though, because like 3, I was interested, and it's like, ooh, that's cool. How are they going to do this? And then once I saw it, then Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2 weren't like must-sees. They became, I know they're out there. I'll get to them when I get to them. Plus, I also had my daughter around that time.
Yes.
So it was the whole, I can't worry about this. I got family at home and all that. Even when Homecoming came out. Didn't see that in the theater.
Nope.
Didn't get to see Far From Home in the theater. I ended up seeing those on digital. So Spider-Man movies, since the first 2, have definitely been me pulling back and going, I'm happy they're out there, but I don't need to see this the way that I needed to see Endgame, or I needed to see certain other movies before everything went crazy. And it's surprising to me. Like I just chose. I'm like, I'm going to take the kids. Let's go. It's the day after opening day. I don't want it spoiled anymore for me. And the only 2 movies I saw in the theater were Sony Pictures this year. Go figure. Out of any production group, that was because I saw Ghostbusters a month before with my daughter, and I saw Spider-Man. And I'm like, it's also like a 1-2 punch when you look at those movies of how do you make nostalgia work and how do you make nostalgia not work. So it's interesting on that level that they put out the 2 movies that to me were like on polar ends of the spectrum for me of what worked and what didn't.
Yeah.
So we don't need to get into the Ghostbusters part, but I'm just saying it's amusing to me how all that worked out at the end of my year last year.
No, for sure. And I'm the same way. Like I'm thinking back now. Obviously, Sam Raimi trilogy I saw all in theaters, but yeah, that was a different time. I mean, 2002 was my junior year of high school. Like I had no cares in the world. I thought I did, but
same here.
So I saw all those in theaters. Amazing Spider-Man. It was the same thing. I was a Tobey guy. I mean, I'll admit when they announced, Andrew Garfield, I didn't know Andrew Garfield at all.
Me neither.
But they're like, oh yeah, Amazing Spider-Man, we're rebooting, origin story again. I'm just like, all right, like, but Tobey, like that was my Spider-Man. I'm like, well, yeah, same thing. But I will say, when I watched them, which I rented the DVDs back then, and I watched them, and I'm like, oh, these are actually really good. I liked both of them, honestly, and I'm not one who was down on Garfield or anything. I know there are issues with the movies, but they're very good movies. I mean, and they got great scenes in both of them. Obviously, the death of Gwen Stacy, which was one of the big parts of the Raimi trilogy. That was always said that they never really went there with Gwen, because that, I think, is just as pivotal a moment for Peter as, the death of Uncle Ben. It's that, Uncle Ben was, obviously he'd just gotten his powers. He was inexperienced. He was young. and that's what put him on this path. But then for him to come to that realization that even if he does everything right, he could still lose. I mean, that's kind of that second part that's pushing Peter into adulthood. Then where it's like, you can do all the right things. You can, great power, great responsibility. But guess what? At the end of the day, sometimes life's still gonna suck.
Yeah.
But we could go down so many rabbit holes. Just that, and we haven't touched No Way Home yet.
Nope, we have not.
I guess before we really dig into No Way Home, the last thing is, so same as you, Homecoming came out. I waited for DVD, digital, however I watched it.
Yep.
I actually was not impressed with Homecoming. I know that was kind of like a lot of people's, Spider-Man's back and all this, and, Tom Holland's the best and everything. But I really didn't care for it when it came out. I like it more now, but it just, to me, it felt so far removed from who Spider-Man is, who Peter Parker is, and everything. And so I wouldn't say I hated it, but it was easily like bottom of the Spider-Man movies. I mean, I'm talking like, I put it like Spider-Man 3 or Homecoming. Like, that's how far down it was. Yeah, and that's what most people, most polite people, said to me. I mean, but I don't know. I just, even looking back, like, I don't know, Tom was, I'm not picking on the guy, but he just didn't look like Peter Parker to me in that first movie. He was, I can't even really explain it. Just, I really felt, just for look, like Toby and Andrew, I thought were more closer to kind of my view of Peter. Now, Tom's actually grown up. In No Way Home, I'm like, no, he's actually looks like a pretty decent Peter Parker now. He's kind of matured a little bit. But regardless of that, just, the whole, really including Iron Man into his story there. And I thought unnecessarily. And obviously I can tell you Far From Home was all based on Tony's legacy. And so it kind of, removing the Uncle Ben and leaning on Iron Man and having Peter with the, the internship at Stark Industries and, the Tony supplying the web fluid and the costumes and the gadgets. And it's like, well, that's not Spider-Man to me. You know what I mean? Like, Spider-Man's always been that kid that's like, I gotta bust ass. I gotta do my schoolwork. I gotta work for the paper because that's the only thing I can easily do and not be fired because I gotta be able to suit up as Spider-Man at a moment's notice. You know what I mean? And so Peter can't hold down a 9-to-5 job. He never will be able to.
Nope.
So I don't know. It nothing felt like Spider-Man to me. So that's kind of where I was going into No Way Home here. So like, kind of, what are your thoughts on those first two movies in the trilogy before we get into No Way Home? I want to set the groundwork here.
I see. I definitely, even watching Civil War, that was the one where I'm like, I don't know who this kid is, and you just see him in the preview and all that stuff. And then once I saw him on the screen and you see that conversation he has with Tony in his room and, the whole, I want to be there and help the little guy, help the, helping those that can't help themselves. And you see he's got that crappy costume in the YouTube clip Tony pulls up and he's like making fun of him and all that. And those were all the moments where I'm like, this is working for me. And it's like, I would have liked,
Good
I would
point.
have liked to see.
I forgot about his Civil War appearance. So good point. Yes, I was on board. Maybe that's even why, to me, Homecoming felt even more jarring. Yeah, because it did seem like we were going to get that. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify my point.
That's okay. But like, his banter with Falcon and Winter Soldier. Yeah. He's like, you got a metal arm? That's awesome. And he's like amazed by everything that he's running into in this scenario. And then him doing even the geek thing with the, hey guys, that old movie Empire Strikes Back, and how old is this kid, Tony? He's like, oh, he's a little young, and all that. I really enjoyed that they really, because Peter Parker to me is somebody who he would be a geek in that way too, with pop culture as well. Because now there's an element of look at all the, look at us, we're podcasting and doing this, but we're not technologically savvy the way that Peter Parker would be. But it's a part of pop culture now. So I kind of embrace Peter being that guy where, yes, he's there with Ned building their Lego Death Star, and he's also really savvy in physics and all this, So I enjoyed that. Homecoming for me, it's like, here is an 80s, and I'm really having a John Hughes superhero movie.
Sure.
It is legit, and it is. I felt it is, and it was interesting. He's still new to the game of even playing a superhero, Tom Holland, and then they put him right up against one of the all-time OG superheroes, Michael Keaton, and he held his own against that. That whole scene in that car when he's doing the whole, you tell anybody about what I'm doing, I'll kill you, and I'll kill everybody you love, and just it's like that Michael Keaton crazy stare that has not gone away in 40 years. Including through Mr. Mom, which I think is hysterical. But that one, it always felt like that was a half step in this story. Right. And like we had the moment like him doing the whole, and I like that they did that in that movie where he says to Tony once he saves that ship and Iron Man helps him save the ship and all that. And, and all that. And he's like, without the suit, I'm nothing. And Tony's like, well, then you shouldn't have it. It's like if you aren't something without the suit, and it's like he has always been something without the suit. He needed to learn that in that movie. And your thing about Tony with him, it's like that to me already set him apart because Tony needs the suit. There's no way around it. Tony is not that guy, but Peter has powers. Peter has abilities, and he was always the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Before that, he just got souped up for a little while. Right. Then when you get into the next one, it's like, and I like that each time we meet Peter in these movies, it's like, okay, Iron Man is his de facto father figure. And then in the next movie, it's, well, now Mysterio can play like a surrogate dad to me because Mysterio knows what he's doing. I don't feel I know what I'm doing. But at the end of the day, it's like, no, you actually know a little bit more than you think. You just need the self-confidence. Yep. And then Mysterio just screws him over, which is funny. But I wouldn't say the first one is no pun intended, but amazing. But it was fun. And then for me, Far From Home, again, it's fun, and it's kind of it's fun to also see them using characters I wouldn't have expected for the villains. Vulture was always a character that I'm like, okay, so you're going to chase an old guy that's robbing banks. Big deal. But they made it cool with the whole, if they didn't have Tony, that story wouldn't have been as interesting because here's a guy who hates Tony because of damage control and all that stuff. And then he's making his mark and Spider-Man's like, I got to stop him. And I love that he's always texting Happy. So I'm ready for my next mission. It's Peter, by the way. And he's texting, but there's all these texts. And it's like Happy saying nothing to the poor kid. And then in No Way Home, or not No Way Home, Far From Home, I just like that we finally get to see him coming into his own. Because even in that one, there was the complaint from Homecoming. Where was his Spidey sense? Yeah. And then we get this whole sequence, which I loved, of him needing to use his spider sense because he can't trust what he sees anymore. How cool is that?
That was great.
I liked them, and I felt they worked within the world of the MCU the way they were starting them off. But I feel like this was the one to just go, this is a Spider-Man movie. This is like legit. We're going balls to the wall. This is Spider-Man, and we're not apologizing for it now.
No, absolutely, I agree. And there was don't get me wrong, there was great moments in both of the Tom Holland, the first two. Mm-hmm. It just, overall, I felt it was going in a different direction than what I wanted for a Spider-Man movie. And then No Way Home showed up. So, going into No Way Home, I know. I mean, let's just get the big thing out of the way right away. I mean, it's just spoiler filled. We don't go in order. So I know obviously there was heavy rumors that Toby and Andrew were going to be in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I tried not to get my hopes up. I think we even talked about this on our last or one of the off worlds.
The last OffWorld, yeah. It was you, me, and Jesse. Yep.
So I don't know. There was a lot of people saying that they were going to be in there, but then they obviously weren't marketing that they were going to be in there. So I was staying cautiously optimistic about it. Like, and I gotta tell you, I don't know because obviously I wasn't timing the movie, but the longer the movie went without them showing up, the more I thought that it was going to be like either wow, they really just didn't show up, or
Mm-hmm.
at that point I'm like, is this just gonna be like a wink and a nod, like to the
Mm-hmm.
audience? Like, are they just gonna be like, um, like, oh, the a portal opens and Toby's like, what's that? And then the portal closes. Like just these little like
Yeah.
Stan Lee type cameos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
honestly, I was legitimately wondering. Like it seemed like that movie went on for so long before they showed up that I'm like, man, at this point, there's no way they're gonna get any substantial screen time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be honest and admit that when it opened, I went on Wikipedia because I know Wikipedia, like literally within 10 minutes of it opening, will have the plot synopsis. And I have been wondering enough to go, I'm not going to worry about spoilers. Are they in this?
Right.
And I read it and it got to the point and I'm like, son of a bitch, they did, like,
Right.
So, and then when I took my kids to go see it, what I loved is even though I read that, I didn't remember it. I just read it just to get the confirmation they're in. So I was waiting. But when we have the moment with Ned, which I love the fact that in this whole movie, it's like I keep thinking about it, and I love the movie in almost its entirety, but the whole Doctor Strange thing is still like a sore thumb with the plot of it, because Doctor Strange, if you think about it, might not act the way he does in this.
Let's get there in a minute.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm going to say, because the fact that Ned has the sling ring from Doctor Strange, and he does I wish we knew where Peter was, and then all of a sudden there's a portal opening up, and then he does it again, and all of a sudden there's Spider-Man in an alley, and he comes through the portal, and I literally was like, well, that's Tom Holland. I looking at it, I couldn't see a difference in the costume right away. I'm just factoring that's Spider-Man. Okay. Right. The minute he pulls the mask off and it's Andrew Garfield, I went, hot damn.
Yeah.
And the audience went ballistic. They went nuts.
Yeah.
They went absolutely nuts. And I'm just sitting there. And my daughter's sitting next to me. She just watched all the Tobey Maguire movies now, but she didn't know who he was. So she felt cheated in that moment because she's like, who's he? I'm like, he's in the other ones. We'll watch him when we get home.
Yeah.
I felt really bad, but I didn't want to like do all this and have her expecting. It's better that you walk in not knowing what's about to happen in this case.
No, exactly. So, and the theater erupted. It was amazing and sensational and everything.
Yes.
Else. So, and then almost immediately and then once they're like, well, let's try it again. Then I'm like, Toby's coming. They got it. We're here. We're good.
Yep.
They're here.
Yep.
But even then, there was a part of me going like, how much are they going to do? How long are they going to stick around? How quickly are they going to send them back? You know what I mean? Like, you're just like, oh, this is great, but they're going to pull the rug out from under me at any moment and just be like, okay, he's gone now, So that was probably the biggest part of it. It's like, not only did they show up, but they were then there for the rest of the movie.
And they're instrumental throughout the rest of it, which is great. It's not just cameos. Same with the villains. I mean, I never ever would have expected, not number one, for them to get everybody back in one way, shape, or form for even the villains, but then for them to go where they went with them.
Yeah,
and it's like this whole story adds up to so much good stuff, and it's all like, here's these threads from these previous movies, and we get to see them paying off. And on top of that, it's a redemption story for every single character almost.
Mm-hmm.
That's a rare thing. It's usually, here's one character. No, here's like 8. We're going to do all the redemption for everybody. It's like, you get redemption, and you get redemption, and you get the, and why not? We'll throw in a free card too. Why not?
Now, and going into it, I was legitimately worried again, because, I mean, we briefly touched on one of the big problems is with Spider-Man 3 and the Raimi trilogy is villain overload.
Oh, yeah.
So when that trailer came out, they're like, oh, we're going to... Doc. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And Goblin. And Lizard. And Electro. And it's like, guys. And Sandman.
And Sandman.
Guys. So
it's either you're you're nervous, or it's that Vince McMahon meme where it's like, and then we got Green Goblin, and then we got Doc Ock, and then we got Sandman.
Yeah, and I still haven't actually seen the movie, but I heard about the post-credit scene, and Venom Let There Be Carnage, where he ends up teleporting to Tom Holland's universe, and it's like, okay, and we have Venom in there too, which, I mean, that turned out very different, but your cord is in front of the screen very, okay. It took me a minute. Like, what is that? But I was honestly worried about, villain overload, obviously. The struggle is real. Or kind of the same thing, like, oh, so this is just going to be, oh, here's Electro, and now we defeated him. Here's Lizard, and now we defeated him. And they really didn't do that.
Yeah.
I will say, do you think... Oh, God, I can't think of their names now. Sandman and Lizard, do you think that they were actually in or on stage at all with the rest of the cast?
I haven't looked it up at all, but the fact that Sandman is Sandman throughout it, and K. Marco only shows up for literally like a blink and you miss it moment near the end.
Yeah, and
I feel like they probably had like some footage from Spider-Man 3 they didn't use, or they incorporated it somehow from what we already knew, and they just gave him, because it's like basically he just looks up and then he goes away, and that's the end of it. We don't really get a whole lot of time with him.
That was the moment in the Statue of Liberty when Sandman changes back, and he's like in the room by himself, and you see that shot of should have been Toby's Peter, right? I think it was.
Yeah.
Like he looks in through the window, and then it cuts to a shot of just Sandman, and then it cuts back to the just Spider-Man. I'm like, that's the moment where, before that, I'm like, okay, like, I didn't even think about it. But after that, I'm like, you never even brought him in. God, what is his name? He was on Wings for years.
Thomas Hayden Church.
Thank you. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Pull that one out. I don't know who the Lizard was played by. I can never remember.
His name is Reese something, but yeah.
George at the Jungle and all that. But yeah, I'm like, well, that's kind of... So those two were probably the ones that kind of at the end there were kind of like a little bit, but that's probably about the only like negative I can say about the villain storyline. I mean... Yeah. The way they... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Finish up. That's fine.
Oh, I was moving on to the next thing, so...
Well, like, Sandman... In my opinion, Sandman was never... He was always one of those villains of circumstance more than he was like an arch nemesis kind of character. So the fact that they handled it that way, I'm like, hey, I'm good. You know, like, and honestly, he wasn't that compelling for me when I saw Spider-Man 3. It's like I felt bad that his daughter was sick, and that's why he was doing all of his like going in and stealing things. And then with the Lizard, even he had a change of heart at the end of Amazing Spider-Man, so that was due to happen there anyway. So that didn't bother me a whole heck of a lot, because in all honesty, those were they weren't really deep characters in their initial stories, from my taste at least, compared to like Doc Ock was really deep, way deeper than I would have expected Doc Ock. And I actually like that they gave Jamie Foxx a bit more to play with here. That's because that guy really he was. It's like Andrew Garfield was kind of chewed up and spit out by the Spider-Man franchise, but poor Jamie Foxx only had one movie and they really messed him up.
Well, I was going to say, I think Electro is a lot of the problem with Amazing Spider-Man 2. I mean, I'm not his whole storyline and everything, and the design is whatever the design is. Like, you're not going to convince these Hollywood execs that, what works and doesn't work. I mean, we've seen that time and time again. Dr. Doom can't get a faithful version of himself to save his life,
Nope. Yeah.
But I like that they took this opportunity to be like, no, we're doing Electro. And they brought in Blue Electro. And they change him. And they get him. And he has the mask. I mean, it's not, they're like, all right, you think a cloth star, lightning bolt mask looks stupid? Fine. When he powers up, we're just going to have these sparks shoot off him that make the mask. And it's like,
that was awesome. Yeah.
Why couldn't we have done that in Amazing Spider-Man 2? Like, it looked awesome. And then with him stealing the arc reactor, being one of the few villains that was actually a villain, because they did actually follow a lot of the previous movies. Sandman is helping Spider-Man against Electro when he shows up. Like, they didn't even revert him back. Like, oh, he's a villain. It's like, no, he's, he kind of freaks out when he realizes that's not, Toby. And guys, we're going to use the actor's name because really that's the only easy way to me to differentiate which Spider-Man we're talking. Once you get all three in the movie, it's like, and we found out that using the numbers can be confusing, and nobody knows which numbers they are. So, that's really the best way. But that's the part where Kane starts freaking out, when he's like, wait, what is going on here? And then, he kind of reverts to his thug ways, but he's not a villain throughout it, Oh, they did the same thing with Green Goblin. He shows up there, he's in the alley, he smashes the mask. He gets that purple hoodie and everything, and it's like, Now, like Sam Raimi, Spider-Man 1, life-changing. But I never fully liked the Goblin costume. I got used to it because, it was everywhere. That 2002 when that came out, that Goblin was everywhere. So you got used to it, but to me, I was never really like, that's my Goblin. But to see how easily that turned into my Goblin, like, that was kind of the surprising thing. It's like, literally all they did was get rid of the hard mask and put some purple on him. And it's like, that's how close we were. Like, that's all you guys had to do.
What got me is in the Raimi movies, in the first one, he always had he had a couple scenes where he's talking to himself in the mirror. Yeah. And it's a one take fluid shot of him looking in the mirror, and then he looked back and he'd be Norman, but then he looked in the mirror and then he's Goblin. And it's like, how hard is that to just let him do his thing? Willem Dafoe, for my money, to this day, Goblin is great. That's all well and good. Everybody associates him with that. But the one character that to this day I want to see him play live action, and I don't think it'll ever happen in my life anymore, is the Joker. Because his face works for either one of them so perfectly. He's got the gauntness and everything. And it's like, at least let him do it in Spider-Man then, since we're not getting that, because I think he would have made an amazing Joker. Yeah. But with Goblin, it's like, he's got the face. Yeah. And the minute you see, like, even in the first Spider-Man, he just had that, like, you know, that crazy smile on his face and that and all that. Right. It's like, you got it. You didn't need to put Power Rangers into it. That was the main thing I kept hearing with something was, this is Power Rangers versus Spider-Man. And I'm like, I agree with that completely, because they have scenes of them, but like there's that part where Goblin knocks Peter to a roof, and then they have their talk about joining forces.
Talking Raimi, right?
Yeah, the Raimi, the first one. And even when the apartment's burning and they're having their discussion, it's like, how horrible is it that you have these two people on the screen, neither of which you can really see their mouths?
Yeah.
I hate that about that movie. The more I've watched it over the years, I was forgiving of it back then, because it's like, it's Spider-Man. I never thought I'd see this. But he's got the face, and they let him do it this time. How cool is that?
Well, that's it. It's like I'm saying, I'm like, in retrospect, I'm looking back at one, I'm going like, we could have had that. Like, we could have had that. Now, I'm sure you've seen the actual first mask they came up with, the prosthetic one, like the rubber one.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's amazing. And imagine that over his face, you know?
Uh-huh.
But it's like, at the end of the day, whichever way you went, you know, like, you went the one way that robbed you of that during those pivotal moments.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't get it. But it was fun to see. It's like, yeah, so they gave him the purple hoodie and those little bit of accents, and he got to do his face, and it's like,
yeah.
And there's our Goblin. Like, I just, you know, same with Electro. It's like, you guys, I mean, they could have easily, and I would have never complained, they could have easily just had him be in the armored suit the entire time, like when Tom Holland first sees him on the bridge. And I would not have complained one iota, because that's the Goblin that we had. That's the Goblin that came to this universe. But the fact that they took the time and they're like, no, let's give the fans what they deserve after all these years. And it's like,
exactly.
Oh, it's so good.
The thing about him, and I'm getting chills remembering it. I mean, like, they let him lean into that, and they let him do it in such a way that even me, 20 years after watching the first Spider-Man movie, this summer it will be 20 years now.
Yep.
There was not much about him that freaked me out in that first movie. It was pretty much, you know, by the numbers superhero movie, just we never saw Spider-Man before, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
But this time around, there is the psychological game now. And this time it actually matters. And this time around, the fight sequences between him and Tom Holland in this movie had my jaw on the floor. And I absolutely love the fact that during those fight sequences, every time he hit Goblin kept smiling.
Yeah.
And that to me was just unnerving, because you could just tell, like, if I would be just like Tom Holland now, I'm like, quit smiling at me, quit laughing. And I'd be like angrier and angrier. And he just kept laughing. It's like I said, that would be Joker, you know, and that's what bugs me about my alternate reality Batman. I want to see that. But it was just so unnerving. And the fact that later on, when Tom is on the roof, and MJ and Ned show up, and they bring the other Peters with them on top of that, he does that whole, I can still hear him laughing. Yeah. And he's crying when he's, I'm like, I'll say it, fuck. Like, that moment just hit me so hard, because I'm like, how unnerving is that to him? He's never fought somebody like this before. And it's so personal so quickly because of what just happened, you know?
Well, and that's the same thing I was heading towards here. You know, you bring in, you know, you're like, oh yeah, they're bringing in all these villains, but you don't really stop and think about it. Like, they're bringing all these villains. Know that Peter Parker's Spider-Man. Now, granted, the whole world at this point knows Peter Parker's Spider-Man.
Yes.
But, like you said, all the villains have this history, this grudge, this, and Tom's like, well, I faced the Vulture and Mysterio.
Yeah. And
like
Thanos. He did fight Thanos.
I mean, that was Avengers. That was literally every character from the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point.
It wasn't, it wasn't
like
personal
you said,
in that case.
Michael Keaton's Vulture. It's at the end of the movie where we're getting to a point where, he's in the car threatening him and his loved ones and everything else. Whereas right out the gate, Goblin's, in Goblin's mind, he's like, I'm going to kill your fucking family. And Tom's unprepared for that. Like, he's not, like, he is so behind the eight ball on all this that, honestly, if the other Spider-Man had not been there, like, there's no way Tom wins this. There's no way Tom's getting out of this alive.
No.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of the turning point of the whole thing. Like you said, once that initial, he tries to help the villains turn on him, like, he's at his lowest point. He's down and out. And that's when we get our reinforcements. Not the big ones; those are coming next Saturday. Tied it all back together.
Little bow right there. No, like something about superhero movies that I think is always more potent with me and showing my kids too is something they did in this movie, which was him saying we just got to send them back to their universes, and Doctor Strange flat out saying to him, they're going to die, but that's what they need to do. You need to do this, and that's all you have to do about it. And May being the one, and it's like, if you think of her in the previous movies, she always has this certain helpfulness involved. She wants to be helpful. She wants to be there for Peter and all that stuff. She's helping
the shelter and everything else.
She's helping out the shelter.
They built that up for 3 movies.
Exactly, and even he did the presentation in the beginning of Far From Home and all that stuff. Yeah. So she's very much community oriented, helping people that are less fortunate and all that stuff. And for a character like that to be the one to pull him aside and say, "You're going to help them." Right. And have Peter look at her and go, I'm flinching right now. Like, I don't care what Doctor Strange says. This is what we're doing because my aunt told me this is the right thing to do. And what I love is it's the hardest thing to do. Oh, yeah. And in Spider-Man, that is what it should be. And in the case of this movie, what that cost him was insurmountable. But it also was like, but that was what, at the end of the day, that would be why this story is so affecting to everybody the way it is, because he did do the hard decision here on almost every level.
And he learns that, before the other Spider-Men show up and the villains are all talking, and, of course you get the ones from Sandman's lived longer than Goblin and Doc Ock, so he knows, like, hey, you guys are dead. Like, you shouldn't even be here. Like, and that's... Yeah. Like, and Tom having to come to that realization, because at first he's like, so these other Spider-Men just, like, killed their villains? Like, I mean, Mysterio died, but that was not Peter. Tom did not do that. And Vulture just went to jail. So he's sitting there like, my alternate universe, I'm just a straight-out murderer. And he's got that doubt in his mind, But then Spider-Man has always been the let's fix them, let's help them. I mean, that's going back to the comics. The Lizard, this whole story is Spider-Man trying to get him back home to his family. Same even with Norman Osborn. Like, he wants him to be there for Harry. That's his friend. That's his friend's dad. Like, it's always been so personal in Spider-Man's world, and he's always been trying to help him. And for Tom Holland, Peter, to get there, to realize, yes, I do need to help them. And then eventually when he meets up with the other ones, they're like, oh, we tried. Like, I did not want them to die. Goblin was impaled by his own glider. Doc Ock, actually saved the city, and for him to come to that realization. And, like you said, for me, what got me is, I even mentioned on our last Offworld episode that, they really did this Peter a disservice by not having Uncle Ben. And in my opinion, at the time, I said, they replaced Uncle Ben with Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, like Tony Stark.
Yep.
And damn, I'm happy to say I was wrong. When May's standing there and she gives him that line, with great power comes great responsibility. I was overjoyed and incredibly sad at the same time because I'm like, she's not going to make it.
Nope. Yeah.
It was that instant where I'm like, because they had the attack. The Goblin attacked her. He threw the bomb. Peter blocked her.
Yeah.
They got up. Like, May got up. I'm like, oh, shit, they didn't kill her. Oh, my God, this is great. And she's like, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yep.
Yeah. That was heart-wrenching. There were people sobbing in the theater openly. I didn't myself, but my daughter hated that moment because she likes her. She likes her so, and she's like, I love everything about that movie, but I hate that moment. And I'm like, I don't blame you because how many of the well, yeah, but the thing is, like, every Spider-Man movie we've had up until this moment has only given Uncle Ben maybe the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie. Granted, the Garfield one, they went back to him then in that voicemail and all that stuff. But and they did the flashbacks even with Tobey, where he like in the sequel in Spider-Man 2, he had that "I'm Spider-Man no more, Uncle Ben" and all that stuff. Yeah,
but and they even did it with King Marco shooting him and all that. But at the same time, they've never let us have that much time with the person who's going to deliver that message. And now that we've had it, we are right there with him going, kill him, like get Goblin now, because it's like this is you're completely empathetic with him right there. And like you said, then when the reinforcements arrive, it's like I'm getting chills even remembering it, because I love that moment with them talking to him, and it's like no one else could have pulled him back the way that they did.
No.
And I love that, where it's like, well, for me it was my Uncle Ben, and I'm thinking when Tobey says it, it's like, yeah, it was Uncle Ben. But then I'm like, well, Andrew's going to say, for me, it was Uncle Ben too. And instead he goes, for me, it was Gwen. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, like they're,
I love said,
that they did that. I love that they went there.
It was the 2 points. And it was beautifully done, because Tobey never got to Gwen. He never was able to. So I like that they did that. Like, like I said, that's always been kind of those 2 pivotal moments in Peter Parker's life. And now and that it just, like I said, for me personally, just to realize, like, after, at this point, 2.5 movies, that, like, no, that's not what they were doing there. It's one of those, like, like the voiceover, the announcing the newest TV show, like, you'll question everything you thought you knew. And I'm like,
exactly.
And you're always like, no, I won't. I genuinely was. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, this is the end of the trilogy.
Yeah.
But we're getting the moments that are like, this should be the beginning of the trilogy. What are we doing?
We were rope-a-dope for 3 movies to believe we already missed the origin.
Yes.
And we really, all that we missed was a spider bite and him building that initial, like the gym suit Spider-Man,
the wrestler,
look.
The
wrestler look. And then instead we got to see the hero's journey, and we by the time we get to this point, it's like, I was sitting there going like, I think I just witnessed the origin of the Spider-Man, and I did not think that's how this was supposed to. Like, I figured we missed it. We missed it before Civil War and all that stuff.
Yep.
So it is cool that we don't know if there ever was an Uncle Ben. Maybe there was, but
Well, no,
maybe
he's
it
still,
just,
he still mentioned him, remember? In Homecoming, he says when Ned asked him why he doesn't tell Aunt May, and he's like, I don't want to burden her. You know, she just went
she's
through
been
all that
through
with Ben.
enough.
He says
did he
Ben.
say Ben? I don't
says
know.
Ben.
Okay, all right.
We rewatched those two movies before we saw Far From Home, or No Way Home. So yeah, he does say after all she's been through with Ben or something like that. He mentions Ben. So it sounds again. It makes you think like, oh, we missed that. We don't know how Ben died, but obviously he did. You know, but we missed that. Yeah, and that's where I was. I guess we're 2.5 movies now. Oh yeah, the rooftop scene where he meets his alter egos. You know. Excuse me.
It was powerful, and the thing is, like, I've been at this point even in my own life over the last few years of, you know, I bet there's a version of me out there that chose something different. I bet there's a version of me out there that chose something worse or whatever. And I like that this whole moment just made me go like, oh my God, this is playing out the way I pictured it, just in my own weird headcanon and stuff. And I like that in some case, like Toby is very much the Zen. He's like a Zen mentor now because he's in his 40s. He's grown. You could say there's this like, I don't want to say it's at ease, but there's this peacefulness about him in the role that wasn't there when he played it because he was going through all the stuff he went through in each movie. Now there's this like calmness he brings to it, which I was like, I kind of dig that.
He's the adult now. He is. Yeah. He's the Spider-Man, you know, honestly about the time in high school when I was reading comics. Like, he's that adult Spider-Man living on his own, getting engaged, getting married. You know, he's the one who's, you know, you're at that point where you're like, okay, he's finally got it all figured out. Like, he's making it work. You know? And you get those little things when they're in the lab talking, you know, and he's like, yeah, I got, you know, with Mary Jane, he's like, you know, my MJ got complicated. We worked it out. It's like, all right, thank you for taking that opportunity. Because, I mean, they were in a bad spot at the end of 3. You know, they were set up to do more. You know, Raimi set up to do more movies, and he never got to. So I like that they took that opportunity to be like, no, don't worry. Everything works out for him. You know, him and MJ, they get along. They're together. They're like, you know, they're just those little lines that just like, same thing like with the villains. It's like, let's just tell a little bit more of their story. Like, check in with them. Like, and I appreciated that.
Well, Andrew Garfield, I like that for him. Like, the ending of Amazing Spider-Man 2 actually is one of my favorite moments of the entire movie. That part with the Rhino and then that little kid dressed up like Spider-Man. And he was the one that he helped him out earlier in the movie when the bullies were after him. So the fact that he's dressed just like Spider-Man, he jumps out from the crowd and he puts on the mask and he's standing there when Rhino's about to charge. And then Peter shows up. He's like, hey, thanks for keeping a lookout on everything for me. I got this. And then he gets the kid back to his mom. And then he webs up that manhole cover and just goes head to head against Rhino. And I'm like, I wanted to see that movie more than I wanted to see the Electro one because of how that was such an I hate saying it, but it was an amazing moment.
It was.
And in this case, I love that Andrew is the one going, I got dark. I stopped pulling my punches. I started, you know, like he's taking out his and the thing is, his character in Amazing Spider-Man was that guy because he was going out for vengeance because of Uncle Ben. And that was one of those storylines that they dropped it in the movie. They kind of just, you know, like it starts and it does its thing and then he becomes Spider-Man. And that was one of the reasons why that one didn't work for me. I don't mind the idea of him going dark at points, but the idea that he adopts the Spider-Man persona for vengeance in that way kind of bothered me in that one Whereas in Toby's, it was he's doing it to follow what Uncle Ben's words were.
Right.
He's trying, I'm going to help others. And in Andrew's case, he was the darker of the three of them, because it's like, I'm going to put on a costume and I'm going to go after every freaking person that looks like that guy and beat the crap out of them.
Yeah.
It's like he's very Batman more than Spider-Man for me. So I like that they went there with him, and he's like, yeah, I don't have anybody. And he's just kind of doing his thing, and this is like reaffirming for him, which is really cool. That's, like I said, it
he
works.
Says, he goes, I we don't have much time for Peter Parker stuff, right? And like Toby and Tom are like, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And Toby giving him that, like, I forget exactly what he says, but it's, like, basically, hey, never give up. Like, there could be an MJ out there for you. You know what I mean? Like, and Andrew, same thing. Like, Andrew just kind of gets like, oh, maybe, like, he's looking at Tom and Zendaya MJ, and, you just see that look on his face. Andrew Garfield's an amazing actor. My God. You just that look at it, and you can just see everything. He's like really thinking, like, hey, maybe it's not too late. Maybe I don't have to give up Peter Parker. Like, they didn't have to, Same thing. It just kind of advances their story. And of course, Andrew Garfield was robbed because he's the only Spider-Man who didn't get to finish his trilogy. Terrible shit.
We'll see how that works out, because there's now rumors out there saying that Sony might do a 3 with him and do the multiverse thing with the Spider-Man stuff. Which, if they did, I would actually, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the stories in his movies, I never felt he was a bad Spider-Man. I always just felt the stories wanted to be dark because Batman Begins kind of forced them to go, oh, well, we should do that because it was too bright and sunny when Raimi did it. I think it was comic booky,
definitely a tonal shift. That was on purpose. The only thing I will say on that right quick is, if they do an Amazing Spider-Man 3, don't try to do what you would have done back then. Like, don't try and make it a direct follow-up to 2.
It should be a sequel to this movie.
Let the time pass. Join up with him down the road, if you're going to do that. That's my only thing. It's like, if you try and go back and be like, no, this is what was gonna happen. It's like,
he's still in high school.
Well, I think he graduated high school, didn't he? Or was he? I don't
remember, honestly. In 2, I don't remember because I only saw that one once. But I saw Amazing Spider-Man.
I know
about shortly after we saw this one. Yeah, he was still in high school even.
Maybe if he wasn't, he was towards the end at least. There was something about maybe it was just before graduation in 2.
Yeah. In the first one, he ends up in class again, and he's talking to Gwen, and he's doing the whole, about don't make promises you can't keep, but those were the best to break, or whatever he says. And it's like, that's the other thing about it. I didn't like that either, because I always thought Peter was a little more respectful, because the whole Uncle Ben thing made him more respectful about stuff. And have that, he even had that, I can't date anybody else there. It's always going to be, I'm Spider-Man and I'm going to put them in danger, and then MJ shows up, But yeah, I'm not going to critique that movie. I've already done enough in this. But for this one, if they made a direct sequel from him getting his feet back on the ground after this journey here, I'd be thrilled to watch a third one with him and see who they cook up for the villain and everything in that one.
So let's talk here a bit. We glossed over it a minute earlier because we were on other things. But, okay, Doctor Strange.
Yeah, so, Doctor Strange.
And it's kind of funny, too, because for me, like, he's really just a means to an end. Like, you really could take him, well, we talked for, some of Mythic talk, but we talked for over an hour now, and not really brought him up except for the fact that he set this in motion with his spell. I know that's one of the critiques I've read online, is a lot of people did not like the way Doctor Strange was handled in this. And basically they feel they feel like he wouldn't have done this. Like this is too amateurish for him. This is too, you know, excuse me, whatever. Like they just don't. To me, now granted, I'm not a huge Doctor Strange fan. I've never followed him by himself. If I've ever, read a comic with him or anything, it's because same thing. He came, you know, he met up with Peter Parker. He was with, Fantastic Four, whatever. Like, I've never sought out Doctor Strange. The movie I've only seen once. So I'm by no means a Doctor Strange, aficionado, but what I know of him, he's always seemed like an arrogant character to me. And I thought that fit right in here. And I think that's the crux of the issues. Like, that's why it goes, because he's so arrogant that he's like, oh yeah, I can do this no problem, when in reality this is a bit of a bigger spell than he's trying to make it seem. And regarding the spell itself, we'll get to the spell itself in a minute. But yeah, Doctor Strange, how did you feel about him in this movie?
I feel a little like a lot of the people out there where they're like, why would he do this? Like, there is certain things about it where it's like, okay, as an adult, you and I have, we both have kids, and, as an adult, there is a certain amount of when your kids come to you asking you for a favor, there is that, well, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do? Right. And you're checking all the bases to make sure that this is the final option to make whatever it is happen. And it was like, I can see why there are people out there going, well, he didn't even say, well, did you give MIT a call? Did you do that? And all this stuff. And the next thing you know, it's just he's going into, I'm going to do a spell and we're going to fix everything. And it's like, could the spell have been something maybe less that and maybe more? Granted, he didn't have the time stone anymore because of the Infinity Gauntlet and all that. But the whole idea of, reversing time enough that it would have gone back to erase the tape, then J. Jonah Jameson has nothing to air and nothing comes out, versus doing what he's doing, or something. Like, I kept thinking, with magic, there's almost too many options for things that you could start doing. Well, what about? Well, what about? Well, what about? But since this is what we're dealing with, it's like, I actually enjoyed that sequence of him trying to cast the spell and Peter constantly, well, what about May? I couldn't put her through that again. Right. What about MJ? What about Ned? Well, what about, and I love that every time he's like, stop talking, he's getting more and more upset about it. And I enjoyed that, but
I did too. And I think that
it was different.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part. I think people kind of overlook that because that's their other thing. They're like, well, the spell itself doesn't make sense. And it's like, well, how would he mess? And to me, I think it's more Peter messed it up than anything else. And I think this is a spell that, people throwing out there, well, why didn't we just make everybody forget about Mysterio? And I think this is a spell that definitely requires consent. Like, there's a reason he took Peter down there with it. There's a reason he needed Peter to stop talking. There's a, you know what I mean? Like, he needed, Peter was the focal point of that spell. I think if Mysterio had still been alive, then maybe our options would have been better to be like, okay, let's make Mysterio the focal point of the spell, make him forget, or, the world forget him, but that's not an option anymore. But yeah, for me, I enjoyed Strange Threat, and I think the other thing is, yes, Peter's a kid, but for Doctor Strange, number one, he's not a father. He's not Peter's father. This is, granted, he's a boy, but I mean, they're graduated. They're graduating. They're applying to college. So I mean, we're not talking 14, 15, even 16. I mean, we're talking like he's going to be able to vote. He's going to college. And number one, like, I fought on a distant planet with him. Yeah. What I mean? Like, are you really thinking about it? I mean, he even tries that throughout the movie, like, call me Steven. Well, that does sound a little weird. Like, they're in an awkward place in their relationship where it's like, we battled aliens and we saved half, the universe together, I'm gonna forget that you're, you don't even have your license yet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it was
a neat
it's
dynamic.
funny. It's like the only people that I would remotely look at as you could be a father figure for Peter Parker in the MCU is probably Captain America. Because he's the only person where I'd be like, he's at least trustworthy enough that he's going to have your back constantly, and he's going to, and he'll be, I could do this all day, and he's going to. I mean, hell, they got him on the freaking videos for the kids at his high school. So you're in detention. Well, and
I think this
for
guy's
me,
I think this guy's a war criminal now.
a war criminal, but well, whatever.
The district says I have to play this.
And it's like, any person he turns to in the MCU for like help is usually somebody that is an egotistical son of a bitch, basically, one way or another.
Yeah,
and it's like these things always backfire on them. So
on top of that, you had Wong making fun, tell Strange like, no, don't you do that, don't.
Yeah.
And so there's a bit of that too, like. Steven's like, well, I was the Sorcerer Supreme, and he snatched it because I was gone for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think it was kind of all that, like to me, that's Doctor Strange. Now maybe people who have followed him a bit longer than me, any length longer than me, maybe that's where they're coming from. But to me, from what I've seen, like this is consistent, and.
Well,
and again, you don't want the credits to roll, 20 minutes into the movie. So you got to get that kind of suspension of disbelief as well.
I mean, for anybody who watched What If,
yeah.
I mean, What If had the perfect version of that on there, where it's every time something went wrong, he just went back and tried to redo it again. Back and tried to redo it, and he kept making it worse and worse and worse until he's got his own arch enemy as himself. Being like the emo dark Doctor Strange.
Yeah. And
apparently they're going to even play that up in his movie now, the Multiverse of Madness, which Raimi, there you go. He's back in that one now. So it works for me in that way, because it's like, if we wouldn't have had this happen, we wouldn't have gotten what we got out of it. So I am more than forgiving in that way. And I'm not trying to look into it further than, scrutinizing it like some people out there have. But I can definitely feel like, and again, me being a dad, it's like there is the checklist of, okay, did you think of this? Did you do this? We didn't do that, so maybe go do that next, and then figure out what happens. And instead, it's just, no, I can just make a spell and just we're good to go. And I liked how that whole battle that they have in the mirror dimension.
Yes.
How cool was that? And even in the when Peter's astral self comes out, because he's trying to grab the box away from Strange and everything. And one thing I heard in a review that I didn't see on the screen, because in the IMAX version you can see it supposedly, is when Peter when he gets pushed out into the astral form.
Yeah.
Apparently they have the lightning around his head to show that his spider sense is kicked in that moment, and I couldn't see it in the theater. So it's something that I'm going to be looking for when it's on home video release, to see if they give you enough to see that. Because how cool is that? They gave us Electro the way that we've been waiting, and they also get the spider tingling, the spider senses symbols. So
that's awesome.
And I like that. Oh, it's math. You're good at math. You're good at geometry, and it's all just geometry to get out of the mirror dimension.
No, I like that. I like how they tied him up there. He got the rings away from him.
Yeah.
So much payoff. I mean, Ned and MJ. I mean, I actually really liked where they went with them. Oh, my grandma always said we have a bit of magic in our family.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was just that was a funny line, but then later it's like, wait a minute.
It pays off. My hands always get a little tingly,
Yeah. And later with him, like you said, with him opening the portals and everything, it's like, oh, so good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So we get our Spider-Man. we talked a little bit about the lab scene. Probably the last part I want to pull out of there is it made me chuckle. It's worth a mention here. It's when they're trying to figure out what cure to do for what villain, and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man's like, "Oh, well, I'll whip up a cure for the lizard. Shouldn't be any big deal." And they're both like looking
Done
at
it
him like,
before.
and he's like, "Yeah, I've done it before." And like again, reinforce. I mean, it's a funny moment showing his character, but at the same time, it's um it's giving Tom's Spider-Man that confirmation, like, no, they are helping. Like they're trying. Like, look, he already did this once. Where it's that whole question for Tom. It's like, well, who am I as Spider-Man? Who am I gonna be? And then you got these two here, like showing him the way. Which is something that they didn't even have. So that's that camaraderie between them. I mean, and that you felt that. I mean, yes, part of it's acting, whatever. But I'm sorry, but even beyond acting, there is like a brotherhood there.
Yeah,
Like they just had such great chemistry together throughout the whole thing. I always wanted brothers.
Yeah, and I love that when they're in the middle of it's before they have the big battle with all the villains, but I just love that where Andrew Garfield's like, I'm the lamest one of you guys. I fought a guy, I fought a lizard, and I fought a guy in a rhino suit. He's just like, and then he's like, I fought a purple alien, and you've been to space.
Yeah. Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, when they were comparing the villains. Yeah. I fought. I had to. They both fought aliens, and Oh, you just didn't get your third movie, buddy.
Yeah. Honestly, and I got to admit, the part with him that got me, and I know there's a ton of people talking about it, but it was that redemption moment for him that, you were saying, like people in the audience were crying for May. I was ugly crying at that moment because I didn't think that was going to happen. Because number one, I haven't watched that movie since it was in the theaters. So I know Gwen dies and I remember that whole sequence, but it didn't register that he would be the one to dive in, because I love that moment with Tom's diving down, figuring he's going to save MJ. He gets knocked aside, and you even see the look on MJ's face, like, I'm dead. And then you just see Andrew just boom headlong to go get her, and that whole him holding her. It's like, are you okay? And then he just the way he is choking up there, I just started bawling. I'm like, God damn it, they did it. They gave him this is what he needed. The whole he needed this. And I love that she's like, "Are you okay?" And he's just, yeah. But that moment was what solidified. I'm like, I really would love to see him back at least one more time, if not bring him back for more. Cross him back in with Tom Holland again for another movie. I don't care if they bring Toby, but bring him back for another round.
There was a lot of tears welling during the movie. But that is the moment where I let.
Yep.
And like you said, the thing is, we saw the moment in the theater or in the trailer and everything, but there was nothing to indicate. Like, you watch a trailer, it shows a shot of Tom, reaching down.
Yep.
So you're like, okay, it's Tom's moment.
It's his Gwen moment. Yeah.
That moment where Goblin swooped in and grabbed him immediately after, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Same thing. I know, and it all just happened so quick. But then once you see Andrew, whooshing down after her, that it just wells up, and you're like, he's got, and you don't know. Honestly, you don't know. It's a Spider-Man movie.
No, you don't.
You're like, there's a part in the back of your brain that's like, are they gonna do this to him twice?
Yeah, exactly.
But no, he gets
and
that's what got me. Honestly, was him standing there holding MJ.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Garfield, the actor, my God, Like that,
Yeah.
everything. He doesn't say anything, but the facial expressions throughout that are like, you get that whole thing. You get him reliving it with Gwen, him realizing he saved her this time, the relief. Like, I've been holding on to this for who knows how long is time? 5 years? 10 years? Who knows? But just that you can just see his body just kind of release the tension, and it's like, I did it. And that's what got me.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole moment of, like, it's the catharsis there, and knowing that story and seeing it play out in his movies, knowing she was going to die in that movie, because it's just, if you have her in there and she's falling, there's no way that they're not going to go to that storyline,
right?
Because that to me is like, if you do that and then she's saved, right, that's just like, that's cop out at that point. You can't do that,
right?
And I can't even think, all these things, like the amount of times I've screwed something up or the amount of times I did something wrong. Yep. And here's this moment he gets to do it again. And he, it's there were like no words. I'm just there. I'm crying. My daughter's like, why are you crying? I'm like, you'll see when we watch these. I'm like, you don't know what part of why I love these kind of movies is the fact that you get to see things play out in a way that you can't react to them in real life.
Yep.
In that way, and it's very much like you're right there with them, and you felt his pain watching that in the theater. Like, that and the kid moments are the parts that stuck with me in Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like that ending and him grieving over her, and like when you see the snap and you're thinking, oh, it's going to be okay, but still that snap, and you see her body and you're like, oh, and even though I knew it was happening, they did it in such a way where in the theater I was still like, and it's like, good on them for, like I've known this throughout most of my life that was supposed to happen, but they still managed to make me gasp the way that they did it. And here we got this moment, and it's like, the redemption, him finally letting go of it, finally feeling like, it wasn't my fault, and I could do this for her. And that's I can go into my world now and feel like I can be a symbol of hope again, versus it being, I'm out there just not pulling my punches ever again. Exactly. He got that back now. And it's funny because there's very much like watching him in this movie. It's not just you're looking at Peter Parker, you're looking at Andrew Garfield. You're literally looking at him and going, this movie is also for you. Everything they're doing in here, yes, this is your Peter's story, and you're getting these payoffs, but at the same time, it's like, this is also for you, dude.
Right?
You missed that third movie.
You got robbed.
You got the rug pulled out from under you, and everything they did with his character in this made me just go like, in the right hands, a third movie would be amazing. I don't want to see the old version bring in like we said already. Bring him in right after he leaves and goes back to his universe again, and let's see him become that hero now. How cool would that be?
And that's, of course, wrap it up here. Tom and Goblin's fight there, on the shore, on the shield, Ellis Island. And I, even after all that, all the talks with the older Spider-Man, all that, Tom was going to kill him. Tom was going to kill Goblin. There was not a doubt in his mind. He was going to end him after all that. And when Toby steps in and catches that glider,
and out of the two of them, he's the only one that could have done that. And
it's got to be him.
I've heard people actually say, the fact that he says nothing. It's just him looking at him and holding that, and it's between
giving
them,
him that, him that minute, like, dude. Think about this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Once you do this, that's
no going back.
There's no going back. And all that is said with no dialogue. You know? And like I said, that's Toby's villain. That's his first. You know, he's like, hey, look, I didn't want him to die. Yes, sometimes your villains are gonna die. That doesn't mean that you kill them. Like that that's the difference there. That's what you need to understand. Yes, some of these villains have died. I've done everything I could to save them, to stop them from harming others without putting them down. And it's like, and that's that line. You've got to understand that. And you know, but that sound as Goblin stabs Toby in the back.
Yep.
And I did not see that coming. And if you had asked me in the moment, to me, Toby was dead. I'm like, my God, they killed him. Those sons of bitches, they killed him.
Exactly.
There was, you know, and then he's lying there just as still as can be. I mean, I'm like, oh. I would have been so pissed if that's how they had ended Toby's Spider-Man. You know what I mean? Like,
agreed.
In an alternate universe. Like, I was getting angry in the theater. Like, that's how you do him?
I'm pretty sure I said at least one or two expletives there because I was like, I didn't expect it to be his final go around the way that was getting set up and everything. We got a message from Jesse.
He's okay.
He's okay. He's okay. But yeah, I love that they did that. I as much as I in the moment it shocked me. I like that they did that because it still made me go, I don't know how this is supposed to end, and there's no guarantee these two Spider-Men are going to walk out of this.
Right.
But I did like the whole you hurt really bad right now. Oh, it hurts really bad. You know, later on and stuff. And
once he gets up and he's like,
once he's
playing it off the top. He's like, oh yeah, I've been stabbed before.
I've been stabbed before. Yeah,
no worries. And then once it's just him and Andrew, it's like, yeah, this hurts.
This hurts really bad. Yeah. It reminds me of Spider-Man 2 when MJ sees him and he's holding up that girder. And he's like, hi, this is really heavy. I always love that moment too. But yeah, I love that this movie never had me figuring I knew everything that was going to happen. And the way they did it, like that's the other thing too. This whole mission Tom's on in this movie where he's trying to save them the entire time. And that is his mission statement from May. And he wants to see it through. And, you know, it's like, I first off, that's a whole new angle that I absolutely love about the movie. I love that he doesn't look at these guys as with your villains in your world. You should just die. I love that showed the redemption side of it for me with Spider-Man and all that. And then the fact that you have the two other Spider-Men showing up and they're contributing in such meaningful ways that this movie, it's like, I hesitate to say a movie is magical, but this one was magical. And the thing that I absolutely loved, that like, I'll say this really quick about the comparison I made earlier in the episode. Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Oh God.
Relied on nostalgia. It relied on it to tell the story. And to me, it just leaned into it to the point where I just sat there going, I don't need this version of nostalgia. But this movie did nostalgia in a way where it made it stronger because of that. It incorporated into the story, and it didn't just keep replaying the greatest hits. It made the story progress further because the greatest hits were applied, and what they brought to the table made the story play out in a way where you didn't even know what was going to happen. And that's why I loved it so much. And I literally was in the theater going, this is a freaking magical movie experience, between the crowd cheering, between, the story playing out, between the acting, between the camaraderie and the chemistry between the three Spider-Man. It's like, yeah. Like, I couldn't have asked for a better Christmas present except for the stuff that my wife got me this year.
Well, and that's it. Like, I've seen that. I've seen that either complaint or comparison or that question. You know, and not many people bring up Ghostbusters. I know that's a big thing that you and I had. We'll get into that at some point here.
Mm-hmm.
Not today. But
no.
Kind of a one that I keep seeing thrown out there is Force Awakens. And people going, well, how can you deride Force Awakens? Basically, everyone says, oh, Force Awakens is just fan service and rehashing plots. But now you all are going, goo goo gaga over No Way Home, which they feel is the same. To me, it's not. Like, this is not... Yes, we're bringing in the villains. We're bringing in the Spider-Men. We're not doing Raimi Spider-Man 1. We're not doing Raimi Spider-Man 2. Are we doing Little Lot? I'm something of a scientist myself. Yes, of course we are. They're characters. They're gonna,
Mm-hmm.
My wife hates how often I use the same phrases. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's their go-tos. Yeah,
right. You're gonna, if that's your character, you're gonna talk like that. But there's a difference between using those characters and just going like, all right, that, here's plot points A, B, C, and D. Like, this was a whole new story.
Agreed.
They reference stuff, they use stuff, but it was not a rehashing of any of the previous movies. So I think that's the big part to me. And I mean, just speaking for myself, I don't know how it can be fan service because I never knew I wanted this. Like, if you had come to me years ago and said, what if we do a movie with all of the live-action Spider-Man in it? I guess. Honestly, its closest equivalent is the animated Into the Spider-Verse. And even that one, I waited forever to see because it wasn't something I'm like, I don't think I need this. Spider-Ham and Spider-Gwen and, Spider-Man Noir. Like, I don't have any ties to these characters. Like, I know of them, but I never followed them. Or, I never read their comics. Even Miles Morales, I've never, my Ultimate Spider-Man days were well before he came on, before the death of Peter Parker, before he came into the picture. Like, so I waited forever to see that. I enjoyed the movie eventually when I saw it, but it wasn't something I knew I needed. Maybe for some fans that it was, but I don't know. I guess I'm just saying I didn't know where this movie was going, even while watching it. But at the end of the day, looking back, I'm like, this is exactly what I needed, and it works so well. But it's nothing I ever would have come up with on my own, and I think that's the best part of it. I love being surprised. I love being shocked. You know what I mean? I love not being able to go like, oh, they're doing the Clone Saga. It's going to do this, this, and this. Or they're doing, oh, here's the Green Goblin story arc. We're going to do this, this, and this. You know what I mean? So, I mean, this was refreshing and new. And that might just be because of where I am as a comic reader and where I ended as a comic reader. Because I know they've done a lot of stuff, with Spider-Verse and such in the comics, which maybe this is more derivative of than I'm realizing.
Well, for me at least, the way I look at it is like I absolutely love Into the Spider-Verse. It's one of my absolute favorite superhero movies of all time, and I didn't expect that going into that movie. There was a night when my wife and my daughter were going out to do something, and I said, I'll take my son to go see that because he was really into Spider-Man. Next thing I know, I leave the theater in tears going, that was the most awesome movie I've seen probably for the last couple years. Like visually, story, everything. But it was a Miles Morales origin.
Yep.
Whereas, the people that think that one is the best Spider-Man movie, I can't say you're wrong, but I also look at it but at the end of the day, I know a new generation sees Miles as their Spider-Man, and there's nothing wrong with that because Miles is a great character. But I grew up from the 78 all the way until now, Peter Parker, and the fact that we've had 3 actors, technically 4 if you want to count the Hammond who played him in the 70s.
Nobody counts that.
I can't remember his first name off the top of my head. It's bugging me. But anyway, you had 3 in our 20 years now that have played this role and made an impact in one way or another for fans. And you get to see that playing out in a way where you, like you said, you didn't know you wanted this.
Right.
I didn't know I wanted this. I haven't looked at a Spider-Man movie since Spider-Man 2 as being a reason to show up at a movie theater anymore, to be honest. And here I am. And I'm going in the middle of COVID, checking this movie out with my kids. And I'm sitting there in the theater going, everything about this is something I needed. And I had no idea I wanted this thing as much as I do. Now, the thing is, time will tell. I will say in Into the Spider-Verse's case, I've seen that thing in at least the mid double digits now because my son was every day playing that especially during quarantine. And that thing still holds up. If he has it on, I'll sit through it every freaking time. This movie, I'll be curious if I want to do that every single time. But I honestly think I think both of those are probably the best Spider-Man movies that we've had so far out of anything we've gotten. And a lot of it comes from the emotion in those movies. It's not about who does the best Peter Parker or any of that stuff. It's about these moments are what makes it essential that it's a Spider-Man movie, and the payoff to it is something as a fan you are empathizing with in that way. Us both crying a bit with Andrew Garfield saving MJ in that moment. It's the same as every time I watch Into the Spider-Verse. The minute that Miles shows up at Aunt May's door, and she's like, "Took you long enough," and he gets the suit, and you have him finally running through the streets of New York, and he's woohoo and all that stuff. It's like every time that happens, I get misty-eyed because I'm like, you're getting to see that kid turn into a man. Yep. And it's not just a man, it's Spider-Man. How awesome is that? So,
Real quick here, Nicholas Hammond is the name you were looking for.
Nicholas Hammond. Okay, at least I got the last name. So.
You did. I've never watched that series. It went for 3 seasons, though. I never realized it was even on that long.
If you ever wanted to see Spider-Man cast a net, there you go. Because that's basically what he did when he shot a web. He just shot a net out of his arm. So
nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, and at the end of that, with Tom's Peter giving up his life. I mean, he's alive. Don't worry, guys. But he goes ahead with the spell. It's the only way to stop it. They're at the Statue of Liberty. They defeat all his villains, but there's more breaking through. Like the multiverse is breaking down. Who do you see? I saw the only ones that I could pick out were Kraven and Rhino. Those were the only two that I could notice.
Rhino was the main one I caught, and I actually nudged both of my kids because they know him from video games.
Yeah.
But I could not for the life of me pick. There were a few where I was curious if it was going to be like Spider-Gwen, because there was a few people that were moving a little bit more, and I was like,
yeah,
from the body language, but I couldn't make out many of them off the top of my head.
Saw next to Rhino there was a guy holding the spear, and he had these. It looked like the Kraven fur, So, but other than that, it was too quick. I couldn't. Now, once that comes digital, I will be.
Well, yeah, we're pausing
and seeing what I see. But
exactly.
For the theater, that's who I could pick out. But so he goes ahead with the spell, and the spell honestly was even more intense than I ever realized it was previous to this. I mean, it wiped Peter Parker off the map. Nobody has any memory of him whatsoever. It's as if he never existed. I mean, when he
Yeah.
goes to the grave of his Aunt May and Happy's there and he has no idea
Yeah.
who it is, no one even knows that he's related to May, just nothing. It really sunk in like, I don't know. I guess I just never really thought about it earlier in the movie. Like, no, when he says no one's going to remember you, like literally
Yeah.
nobody,
Yeah.
nothing,
Well,
never existed. It's like, damn.
I even like the humanity in that moment too, because Doctor Strange being Doctor Strange, he always has that aloofness and all that. And then the minute he starts casting spells, like, it was nice to know you, Peter Parker. And I even got a little choked up there because I'm like, even he's gonna miss the kid, like, and then on top of that, something I'm realizing is you have Happy at the grave, and it's like, this is not the first grave he's visited.
No.
And there's that, it's like everybody that he cares about is getting ripped from him too. And you kind of have that, like, I kind of wanted Happy to look at him and go, you want a cheeseburger? Yeah, because of the whole thing with Iron Man's kid and Endgame. But yeah, like, how did you know? Or through Spider-Man. I'm like, oh my God, to be standing there and have to play this out like you never have met this guy, but
right, like you can't even offer the support you want.
Exactly,
because he's gonna think you're a weirdo. Like,
and then on top of that, he gets to see what MJ and Ned are up to, and it's like you can tell he wants to give a little more there.
He wants to throw it all there. He went there with every intention of just like, hey, look, just listen. I know I'm going to sound crazy, but here we go. This is what happened. But he realizes that's not fair to them. That's not like you can't do that. They're not going to believe you. You could damage your relationship forever, And the only thing I could think of, I mean, obviously MJ and Peter, sad, blah, blah, blah. But for me, with Ned, him talking to the other Spider-Man, finding out about their best friends and how they turned on him. And at the Statue of Liberty, when Ned is like, don't worry, Peter, I won't try to kill you. And Peter missed all that. Tom Holland, Peter missed all that. So he's like, thanks? Like, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. But then when you get to the end and you're like, knowing the legacy of who Ned Leeds could potentially be. And now knowing that he has forgotten the promise he made to Peter, it's like, I got chills thinking of the potential there. Like, this could go bad very quickly, very easily. And I'm sure we haven't seen the last of that thread.
No, and I hope that they do play it up at some point. I don't know if I need him to be like a flat out villain, but it would be interesting however they do it, because that is a plot point where the whole thing to me is like a plot point, because there are people out there going, okay, they're working on 4, 5, and 6, I think, already. I know they're going forward with 4.
Yeah.
But it's like if they're doing another trilogy with this and they don't have that payoff in one way, shape, or form by the 6th movie, that'd be ridiculous.
Nothing else, they at least need him in kind of the old school Aunt May to J. Jonah Jameson role where Ned is very vocal against Spider-Man. Like, at least go there. You know what I mean? Who was once my best friend, he helped me, now he's like against everything I stand for. Like, but I think they'll probably push it even further. So
it'll be interesting. I mean, who would have thought that a memory wipe spell would make more doors open for possibilities than not at the end of this movie? But it did.
And at the end, I said it here. I'm on record. Again, I have to eat my words. I said on the previous episode, I was always disappointed that we never got that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, that kid that's on his own, making his own costume. I did not see any way that Tom Holland could ever be that Spider-Man, based on Homecoming and Far From Home. And they fucking did it.
They did. And that moment when I saw it, I'm just like, oh man, Matt is going to have trouble with this part because that was great.
I loved it. You get him in the apartment. You get it pans to the mask on the bed, in the sewing machine, in the fabric. And then he busts out that window in that fully spandex, hand sewn costume.
Yeah.
And it was that moment. Like I said, there was moments earlier in the movie where I'm like, where are we going with this? It was at that moment where I'm going, this whole damn thing was his origin story.
Yes. Yeah.
And I can't believe they hoodwinked me like that. I mean, I like to think that like I said, we know so much, we've seen so much, we've read so much. We're like, we usually at least have an inkling of where things are going, and they had me up until that last scene that I never would have at any point before they're gone. Oh yeah, this is just his origin story. We're gonna get to that Peter. I thought that Peter was gone. The Uncle Ben, the great power, great responsibility, like all that, we lost it all.
Yeah.
But that's right where we are at the end of this. And I have to applaud these filmmakers.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the first two movies did a really good they did a really good job of showing him using whatever Tony gave him, usually got him into more trouble than it was worth. And yes, it was helpful, but still, it went to places that even like Tony installed the kill option, and he's, I don't want to kill people. No, it's like Tony designed it the way Tony thought of it and made sense. And in the case of Peter, he's not that guy, you know. And I like that in the end of Homecoming, he just goes, I'm good. I need to be. Somebody's got to be out there for the little guy. And he walks away from that. Yep. And in the sequel, it was because of Tony's tech that's how that all ended up screwing him over anyway too, because of the Edith and all that stuff. Yeah. And so it's like, it makes sense. Get away from it. And
for a second there, he thinks everything's good. He's like, okay, we stopped Mysterio, got rid of that. MJ knows who I am. Like, everybody who's important to me knows. Like, I can finally get on with my life. And then, of course, Mysterio wrecks all that. So,
exactly.
But yeah, then to get here in that very ultimate Spider-Man looking costume as well. That's the other thing. It's that shiny blue and red, which to me screams the Ultimate Comics. And on top of that, going back to the Homecoming, where, you know, Prowler talks about his nephew.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I'm excited for the possibilities in this universe that, you know, we're coming up to and where they can go.
I same here, because I honestly would love to see Miles show up in live action finally, because Into the Spider-Verse did a great job of making that character known. Yep. So it would be fun to see, here's who's going to play him for real, and, you know, invite him into the new Tom Holland story, because that was something in an article I was reading where he said if he's playing Spider-Man by the time he's 30, he's done something wrong. Yeah. He's 25 currently.
Right.
So, and if they're doing 3 more movies and they don't at least try to introduce Miles, they're doing something wrong, in my opinion, anyway.
Right.
And one of the things I threw out there actually to Jesse and a buddy of ours, the whole the Venom part.
Yes.
And the fact that you have that little piece of Venom left, a little bit of the symbiote left, and I was actually thinking, you know, like, that interests me more than I wanted it to, for the fact that I don't like how they do the Venom movies and all. And Venom in the movies so far has not worked for me. But the thing that I think is cool about that is because he's been so reliant on Tony, and he's always had a souped up suit, and now he's going just legit Peter Parker. When that hits, if that hits in the next 4 or next 3 movies somewhere, I like that idea of he's going to have his own troubles without having the tech in his suit now. And now all of a sudden, here's something giving him power that is not tech. And it's him doing the whole, I forgot how much I wanted this. And him, then it turns into a bigger problem for him on that level. So, I'd be curious to see what they do there.
And now that Marvel has the rights to Fantastic Four back, we could actually get Reed Richards helping him with the black suit.
Yeah, like in Secret Wars.
Like the creator originally intended.
Yes. I've never had a problem with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but I had no idea that this movie was going to do it. Well, now I know you and I were on the opposite end of the spectrum on this,
and that's why I wanted to start with that, because for all my issues, now I'm like, look where we're going, Tom. Come on, Spider-Man. Let's go. Because they completely redeemed themselves. Like, I'm not going to say that Homecoming and Far From Home are my favorite Spider-Man movies. They're not. But in retrospect, this one brings those up. Because now I see where they're going with this. And I've gotten to a point where I get my Spider-Man. It's... And I honestly, my mind's racing with the possibilities of where do we go from here. I mean, no one knows about Peter Parker. None of the other heroes anymore. They know Spider-Man still. So now we get to see that fresh and anew, where, he's letting people in, as he deems it necessary or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much potential there. And then you got all the potential, the rumors about, Raimi's 4 and Amazing 3, and, who knows if anything will come from it. But it's exciting just to kind of think about, like, hey, there's the possibility now.
Exactly. And real quick, I think, if I heard right, the director of the Spider-Man movie, John Watts, he's doing the Fantastic Four.
Oh, is he? Okay.
So it's like the fact that now you're talking about Reed Richards and Peter working together at the same. You got a chance right there, him bridging both of those worlds, maybe. So who knows?
Well, and I always remember, like, Johnny Storm and Peter were very close. Exactly. So maybe that's one of the first guys that he kind of lets in now that, now that he's back to square one with the. I mean, not only is back with the secret identity, but he's really back with the secret identity. So, it'll be cool. Interesting where they go from here. Do you think that Toby and Andrew's Spider-Man, do they remember this adventure? Or do they kind of get dropped back into their time? And I guess for the villains, too. Do we remember what happened here, or do you think at the end they just get dropped back in their timeline? It's more like a you never left type of thing.
I hope they do. I that's one of those time traveling things or whatever. It's like you can't take away what they did, even though if you dropped them off a second after that they came over, they still had that adventure, So like there's that element in it where I'm like, I don't want Andrew to lose it. And I don't want Toby to, because Toby, like I said, he was more like the Uncle Ben for those guys this time around. And then Andrew doing the whole, he can finally stop being vengeful and be a hero again.
Yeah, at least get started down that path.
Come back, the comeback trail for Andrew at this point.
I agree.
So
I agree on
cross
both
my
the
fingers.
Spider-Mans. Now, the villains, though, that's the interesting part to me. Because... like, I want them to remember, because otherwise, like, what was the point? I mean, because they did succeed in curing them all, which is something that even Andrew and Toby didn't succeed in completely in their movies. But then you've got the, but then that completely changes everything. If Norman's no longer insane when he goes back, then he doesn't die. So then Harry doesn't become the new Goblin or whatever. It's stupid. name they couldn't use, and they couldn't just call him Green Goblin. So you got this butterfly effect of all right, what are we going back to then? More so, I think, with the Toby movies than the Andrew. I think the Andrews pretty much can get through with Lizard and Electrum. Could probably be better moving forward, honestly. But yeah, Toby's whole timeline could change.
It is interesting in that way because like those, it's like, okay, if Goblin doesn't die, he still did the whole movie up until the ending then.
Right.
And then if Goblin doesn't die, then it doesn't put a rift between him and Harry. And then on top of that, if Octavius doesn't die, then that's a whole. Well, then how do they fix the chip? Yeah. But then that's at the end of his thing. It's like there's all these. That's why I'm almost like, let's not go to Toby. Toby was great to be in this movie, and I'm good that if he doesn't show up again. But Andrew has the most possibilities there because those didn't affect him becoming who he is, because those were major events within Toby's timeline. With him, it was more, this was Tuesday with Andrew, and so that's just my take on it. But yeah, that does turn it into a cluster.
Yes.
If you think about it too hard.
Octavius, not as much really, because he had, even with the chip malfunctioning, he did, stop the reactor. Like he had already, he was like, what am I doing? And he had, he was taking steps there. So basically, it sets him up actually to be a pretty strong ally, which maybe changes the events of Spider-Man 3 if Spider-Man can call on Doc Ock to, you know what I mean? Like that's.
I want to see that movie. Because they did a good job of having him show up even as a cavalry in this movie for that. Yeah. And I thought that was great. And again, Doc Ock was a character I never gave a crap about. But in the movies, they managed to have Alfred Molina, and that guy's got charisma. Absolutely. That guy's got that charm. And like by the time that movie ended, even I was like, I don't want to see him die. I'd just like to see him like not be evil. Like it. Like don't kill the city, but just be cool, man.
Did you see that meme of Alfred Molina where he's been in movies with each of the Aunt Mays like outside of this, and it's like hello nephews.
Hello nephews. That would have been the best way to end the whole movie. Is just like Tom Holland walks into May's apartment, and there he is cuddling Marissa Tomei, and even Happy's there like, we had a date. And then he walks away or whatever. Do the Captain America line.
I love it. I can't wait to see where they go. I hope they keep them coming. I mean, I hope we get another trilogy out of this. That's, like I said, that's how much of an about face this movie did for me. I mean, it hit all the points. It was amazing, sensational, spectacular, and friendly neighborhood.
Well, there was something Marvel put out actually, I want to say like a week after the movie came out, and they've now actually deemed, I think it's Toby is the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and now Andrew will be Amazing Spider-Man, and that leaves Tom being possibly just Spider-Man because there was that comic, or maybe he's the Sensational Spider-Man.
He's Ultimate.
He's basically Ultimate, but they didn't put it in the thing.
Did you not see the costume at the end of the movie?
No, but it was the Ultimate storyline basically too, in a certain way. But at the same time, it's like they're not really going out of their way to say it's Ultimate either, but they're deeming them, those are what they're knighting them now is, okay, Toby's friendly neighbor, which I kind of wish they said that Tom was, because he used it in the movie. He actually had that note about, please don't steal this bike, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man or whatever at the first movie.
Yeah, but I get where they're going there, because Tom can never just be that with what came before. I mean, he's getting closer.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is Ultimate. You're right.
He's totally Ultimate. And I never saw it coming. All right, any final thoughts?
Best movie I've seen this year. Hands down.
Best movie I've seen in a long time.
Between this and Endgame, and I don't really even judge them on the same level, because Endgame brought out some of a lot of stuff with me, but this one for me was just like, I felt like I was revisiting stages of my own life watching each of those on the screen. And that meant a lot to me in a lot of ways because of the different places I was with life. But it probably one of my absolute favorite superhero movies, right up there with Into the Spider-Verse, ironically. So
is this now the best Spider-Man movie in your opinion?
Yes, but it also relies on the others in order to make this story
100%.
have the consequences. But for my money, if you've seen the other ones, like this is the best one you could ask for everything leading up to it. So, yeah.
Previously, mine was Spider-Man 2 and Raimi's trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one does top it. Honestly, I still want to get back and watch it. I'm hoping to watch it one more time in the theaters before it's gone. I don't know if that's going to happen, but this is definitely one I'm going to rewatch a number of times.
Same here.
I guess last but not least, now that we finished Tobey's trilogy, we got all we can for now of Andrew's trilogy, and now finishing Tom Holland's trilogy. Best Spider-Man.
Best Spider-Man out of the three of them?
Yep.
See, that's the thing. I absolutely love Tom. And it's not saying there's anything wrong with Tobey or Andrew, but he all around has what I like about it. Physicality, he can do the Spider-Man stuff. He doesn't have the wisecracking like Andrew. That's the only thing that edges him out a little bit more as Spider-Man for me. Mm-hmm. He was really good with that. He had that accent and everything and all that. But I mean, like each of them have these heartfelt moments that are meaningful and stuff. But all around, Tom's just won me over that much with every and he cemented himself in the MCU on top of that. And I love the MCU, so that's really. It's hard to divorce myself from the MCU to know, okay, Tobey did his own thing, Andrew did his. But what about you?
Fair enough. I still gotta go Andrew. I still think that he hits. I mean, Tobey's like my first love, and Tom's just a cool new kid. And I'm really curious to see where it goes from here with Tom. I think Tom now has the potential to win it for me, but like I said, I'm turning around, but I've still got those first two, which I feel not as deep of a connection to, especially Tom's Spider-Man, especially in Homecoming. I'm still not sold on that. So for me, Andrew, he is the best all around. Like you said, the wisecracking, his storylines and everything. I really think he really focuses in on kind of what I view as Spider-Man. So for now, it's going to be Andrew, but Tom's got potential, and I don't think he's done with the role yet.
For me, just following up real quick, me at least with Andrew, I wish they would have written him like Tom, and as in like the vengefulness I didn't want to see, and there was definitely things about his character, like even the whole the promises. Those are the best promises, the break and all that stuff. To Gwen, it's like, those moments for me never felt Peter Parker. It felt like they wanted to just squeeze a different character into his Peter, which bugged me. I wanted to see, like, probably if you would have had the Tobey Peter, but updated a little more with the way that Andrew can deliver the lines and all that stuff, and maybe have it be more realistic of a world than the Raimi comic book looking world. Yeah, I would have agreed with you completely, because that's I think where my thing will always be is his Peter Parker never felt like they wanted to write a Peter Parker. They felt like they wanted to write just an emo kid because of like Twilight and stuff like that to me. And that's the only way I can describe it. And I'm not trying to, it's like he shined above what they gave him. Yeah. And that's why I will always be like, I can see why you love that. But I always felt like they hamstrung him based on how they did that versus if they would have made him legit Peter Parker. I honestly felt like he probably would be that actor out of the three of them then, because he would have been able to do both flawlessly. The guy's up for like Golden Globes and Oscars again. I mean, it's like he's got it in him. He's a very talented individual. So yeah, it's like no one of them is a bad version.
No,
it's the writing in it.
There's no bad
thing. So
there's no wrong choice here.
There isn't.
Oh, we are blessed. We are blessed to be in this era, this age. Oh, that's the last thing. So, they said that this is the 27th movie in the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
Is it anymore, though, in your opinion? Because technically there's at least 5 movies that we now need to add.
Yeah.
Just based on this.
Mm-hmm. What's funny is there was a meme of Toby talking to Tony and doing the whole "look at me, I'm the first MCU movie now," and it's like, you know what? You kind of got a point.
You're not wrong.
You're not wrong. I mean, you just didn't show up in Avengers movies, but you literally got pulled into the MCU. So at this point, it didn't say Marvel Studios. It said Marvel, but I'd say it's a pretty good. Like you can grade it on a curve and just say, yeah, that's the first MCU movie now.
It is everything. Everything's relevant. I love it.
So
I know they'll keep it just straight, in this universe, but still, it's nice. Like I said, it's nice. It's unexpected, especially in this day and age when everything is so split with, well, I own this right, I own that right. Not only for Marvel to get, Spider-Man back at all, but then to be able to bring in the Spider-Man before they were really, before they were Marvel Studios. Like, that's a feat in and of itself in this day and age with everybody wanting to hold on to their little bits of IP everywhere. So
exactly.
We are blessed. We are lucky. And I need to go watch it again. It was awesome.
I wish it was on Disney Plus or Vudu right now, so I could just pop it on and
I would
kick back and watch it, because I could definitely go for it right about now.
Absolutely. All right, guys. I think that wraps up. That was our look at No Way Home. Probably about as long as No Way Home was, but it was worth it. If somehow you watch this whole thing and have not seen No Way Home yet, I don't know what's wrong with you, why you'd rather listen to us talk about it than go see it. But go see it. It's amazing.
Go see it.
You will
go see it. Go see it more than once if you can.
Absolutely. So, guys, take care. And until next time, go write Andrew Garfield and tell him how much you love him.